It's in the very nature of time that it runs on more quickly than any of us would wish, and I must compress all that I want to say into a few brief and fleeting minutes. Now, perhaps that in itself represents one of the lessons that I can impart, the preciousness of each moment. Still, we must try. Every modicum of knowledge that can be truly and rightly transmitted from one generation to the next can prove invaluable. Our generation felt that way, and so will yours. But in casting aside the old, don't throw out those values that have been tested by time just because they're old. There's an old American tradition called house raising. The pioneers out west would get together and build each other's houses. That was a long time ago, but it's still going on. Every time someone helps a lonely old man or woman in a shelter for the poor, that's a house raising. We must not let the creation of wealth become a preoccupation with material things. We've made so much economic progress in our country, but it'll mean very little if your children look back at your days as a time of materialism and selfishness and looking out for number one. I wish you a nation of strength and wealth and power. But more than that, I wish you a nation where the house raising continues. Money's only money unless it represents genuine commitment. It's good for society when we all know that no one is manipulating the system to their advantage because they're rich and powerful. But it's also good for society when everyone pays something, that everyone makes a contribution. I can't resist telling you that in working my way through school, there were no government programs at that time. You had to get your loans from foundations, things, charitable groups and so forth. Don't be concerned because you haven't made up your mind. I graduated from college with a degree in economics and sociology, and still had not been able to pin down exactly what I wanted to do. One of the best jobs I'd ever had was the job I had working my way through school. I was washing dishes in the girls' dormitory. It wasn't until I went back to my summer job to get a little money to go job hunting. After I'd graduated, my summer job was lifeguarding at a river beach in my hometown. And there were people who came out from the city and corporate heads and so forth with their families every summer, and I'd taught their children to swim. The demand was just maybe to get a job of any kind because I graduated at the very depth of the Great Depression, 1932. One was there, and he told me that if I could tell him what I wanted to do, he had contacts with a number of businesses and areas. He would do what he could to get me a job. And I went home and I thought, and I finally realized that in spite of my degree in economics and sociology, I didn't have the nerve to say I wanted to be an actor. But radio was pretty new, and I said I wanted to be a sports announcer. He said, you start out knocking on doors, telling people then at those doors what you want to do, businesses. And someplace along the line, even in this depression, you'll find someone in a radio station. He said, well, I don't have any contacts. There's nothing I can do to help you there. But he said, maybe that's better. Let me give you some advice. He gave me the best advice I've ever had. Don't ask to be a radio or a sports announcer. He said, just ask for anything because you believe in the future of radio. Anything inside the station, and then take your chances on there from getting to what you want. Don't let it bother you that you haven't made that decision yet. You'll change your mind many times before it comes the right moment. But then when it comes, just knock on the door of whatever you've chosen to do and ask until you find somebody that will let you. And then you'll get a job. And he says, don't get discouraged if you go to knock on a lot of doors. Remember, a salesman sometimes has to make 250 calls before he makes a sale. It turned out to be the greatest advice I was ever given.
We have so many people who can't see a fat man standing beside a thin one without coming to the conclusion the fat man got that way by taking advantage of the thin one. We've sought to solve the problems of unemployment through government planning, and the more the plans fail, the more the planners plan. These proliferating bureaus with their thousands of regulations have cost us many of our constitutional safeguards. How many of us realize that today federal agents can invade a man's property without a warrant, They can impose a fine without a formal hearing, let alone a trial by jury, and they can seize and sell his property at auction to enforce the payment of that fine. There should be no cause for worry, because as long as they had the power to tax, they could always take away from the people whatever they needed to bail them out of trouble. And they're doing just that.
Raise our taxes, and then raise them again, so that government can be even bigger.
No government ever voluntarily reduces itself in size. So government programs once launched never disappear. Actually, a government bureau is the nearest thing to eternal life we'll ever see on this earth. What does it mean whether you hold the deed to or the title to your business or property if the government holds the power of life and death over that business or property? And such machinery already exists. The government can find some charge to bring against any concern it chooses to prosecute. But seriously, what are we doing to those we seek to help? Every responsible farmer and farm organization has repeatedly asked the government to free the farm economy. But who are farmers to know what's best for them? The wheat farmers voted against a wheat program. The government passed it anyway.
My opponent seems to only see big government and little people. It would be like having a coach. Swimmer. He had to swim down that pool carrying an anvil, or a runner to sprint with a ball and chain around his ankle. You think we should sit back and let that happen to America?
The ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism. And regardless of their sincerity, their humanitarian motives, those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Well, I, for one, resent it when a representative of the people refers to you and me, the free men and women of this country, as the masses. This is a term we haven't applied to ourselves in America.
It'll determine the kind of America that we pass on.
Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
No force on earth can stop individuals from achieving. To pull together and work together. But what's really important is what inspired us to do these things. What's really important is the philosophy that guided us. The whole thing can be boiled down to a few words: freedom, freedom, and more freedom. Whatever you do with it, you will be the one who's doing the doing. You'll make the decisions. autonomy. You're free to be whatever you want to be with no one and nothing stopping you. In a free society, you're free to invent yourself, to turn yourself into a great teacher, a race car driver, a minister, or a movie star, or a grower and seller of flowers. You could be anything. It's your invention, and there's nothing to stop you. I know a fellow who once bought into a little hamburger stand out west. He's just a regular guy. He worked hard, advertised, and the little stand prospered. You may have heard of it. It's called McDonald's. Remarkable things are happening everywhere. And whatever else history may say about me when I'm gone, I hope it will record that I appeal to your best hopes, not your worst fears, to your confidence rather than your doubts. It's a philosophy you can live by. In fact, I hope you do. I want you to know that I have always had the highest respect for you, for your common sense and intelligence, and for your decency. I have always believed in you and in what you could accomplish.
That you and I have the ability and the dignity and the right to make our own decisions and determine our own destiny.
Enjoy your freedom. Breathe it in. Use it to create the most important and moving thing a man or woman can create. A decent and meaningful life. Go for it. Reach those heights. Excel. You already have a voice. Make it heard.